name, pronouns, neighborhood, and why you came today. And there is a recording in progress because there are many folks who want to learn what we're learning together tonight. My name is Godfrey Plata. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm the Deputy Director at LA Forward Institute, and I'm super excited to see a good crowd here tonight, a Thursday on Zoom, to learn about capital improvement plans. Tonight's call is being uplifted and supported by LA Forward Institute's Transportation Justice team. And so I'm going to pass things to Hannah, who's been leading that volunteer working group. She'll introduce herself, our organization, the group, and what we're doing here tonight. Hannah?
Amazing. Thank you, Godfrey. Hey, everyone. And thank you so much for being here tonight. Before we get started, I just want to go over the fact that we are recording. So if you're more comfortable with keeping your camera off, that's totally fine. Just do what makes you feel the most comfortable. At the same time, I also want to recognize that we're kind of living in a rough reality right now. There's a lot going on, from the fires to the transitions at the federal level. And I know things feel super chaotic. So thank you so much for being here despite all of that. And we're so, so grateful for your time. More importantly, we also want to be mindful of the moment where we are and, how we can collectively work towards some meaningful change. With that being said, though, my name is Anna. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm born and raised in the South Bay, and I've been part of LA Forward for some time now. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been a part of the work before, hopefully, hello again, and we're glad to have you back. And just for those unfamiliar, LA Forward is a nonprofit organization. It has both a C3 and a C4 branch. Today, we're operating under LA Forward Institute. I'll click on the next slide. Which is a C3, which means it's nonpartisan, strictly educational for today. Our mission mainly is to support Angelenos across the board in pushing for policies that make LA fair and thriving for everyone. So we work on a wide range of different issues, whether it be unarmed crisis response, housing reform, and of course, we have our transportation justice group, which I'm going to plug real quick because we are the people who are actually leading this call. To give a brief rundown of our group, we started over the summer trying to figure out why transportation in LA is so expensive to build and takes so long to build. And so in doing that, we were able to meet with a ton of different community organizations and really amazing, intelligent people who really taught us a lot. Because ultimately, who gets access to safe, reliable, and affordable transit has implications for equity and justice. So if that's something that interests you, we meet every Tuesday at 6 p.m., 6 to 7. And I think someone hopefully will send a link to that in the chat. So you can totally sign up. We'll welcome anyone, hop on the train, pun intended. With that being said, we'll move into the agenda for today. So right now I'm kicking us off with introductions and kind of a brief overview. And then we're going to hear from Jessica from Investing in Place, who's going to break down the importance of capital infrastructure plans, which is why we're here, and what that really does mean for us and our communities. And then we'll be joined by Alex from ACT LA, who will add another layer to the organizing and advocacy side of it. And then after that, we're going to cut the recording. So if you want to turn your cameras on, you totally can. And we're going to have a little Q&A and discussion section. And just with that in mind, throughout the Zoom while we have our speakers, it would be amazing if we could try to all stay muted. And if you guys have questions, you can send it in the chat box. And my lovely friend Eric is going to be going through and taking note of the different questions, so you guys will be heard. And that'll happen after the two speakers. And then finally, we'll wrap everything up with next steps, so how you can get involved and how we can kind of push for some meaningful justice in LA. With that, I am beyond excited to introduce our first speaker, Jessica Meany, because if there's anyone who understands what it takes to fight for equitable, community-centered transportation policies, it is her. She is the founder and executive director of Investing in Place, which is one of the groups that we've met with. They are a nonprofit dedicated to making sure that our public dollars are spent in ways that actually reflect the people that rely on it. So she's been at the forefront of all the efforts to push for more inclusive decision-making and ensuring that transportation funding is equitably distributed. Super, super important work. I'm really grateful that she's here tonight. It's amazing that she's taking the time out of her day to educate us, and I can't wait to see how we're going to be able to break down a capital infrastructure plan. So what they are, why they matter, and how they influence everything from the buses we ride to the sidewalks that we walk on. Obviously, this is our first conversation and what we hope will be an ongoing series. So stay tuned and let's all hopefully build a shared understanding on how we can kind of push for some real change in LA. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the torch to Jessica. I'll let her take over. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and she'll take the stage.
Awesome. Thanks, Hannah, for that super generous introduction. And thanks, LA Forward, for hosting this and inviting me. Also seeing so many friends and colleagues that I've been working with over the years on this. So really excited to chop it up in our discussion part of this. What I always like to do when I start these presentations is I do a little bit of quiz. So if you want to chat in the chat box, I'm just always curious what people think the City of LA's infrastructure priorities are. So just write in the chat box if you're out there. That's my second question. Also, do you know who makes infrastructure decisions in the City of LA? So while you're writing that, let's get into it. A little bit about me. So as Hannah said, I'm Jessica Meany and I work at Investing in Place. I've been working in the nonprofit sector around public policy and transportation issues in the LA region for about 15 years. Before that, I worked as a transportation planner at the Southern California Association of Governments, a little bit at Metro. So worked a little bit in government, but for the majority of my career on this type of stuff, I've been in the nonprofit sector working as an advocate. And what I've worked on things like safe routes to school, how to make it safer for families and students to walk and bike to school. I've worked on things like complete streets, worked on ballot measures to increase funding. I've worked on Vision Zero, sidewalk reform, better buses, bus stops, all of those things. And let me make sure I'm doing this right. It's all kind of led me to this place that really concerned and asking a lot of questions about how LA manages its public right-of-way. What I mean by public right-of-way, I'm talking about sidewalks and I'm talking about streets. So I've tried to work as an advocate to kind of fix things on our streets and sidewalks for many years. And it's kind of gotten me here to being like, wait, there's no plan? There's no budget? And so that's what we're going to talk about today is why we need a citywide infrastructure budget as we move forward and the opportunities we have that Mayor Bass has presented us. Before we get into that, we just want to kind of set the stage so we all remember just how ginormous the city of Los Angeles is. We're talking over 200 plus neighborhoods, street mileage and sidewalks that are over 7,000 miles. So from LA to New York is like what, 3,000, 3,500, right? So we have miles of roadway and sidewalks that go all the way to the East Coast and back again. LA is just also an enormous city too, compared to some of our other cities that we think of frequently. We're at 500 square miles. So for managing an infrastructure with 500 square miles without a plan, I think we all can see that that's quite challenging. So what's going on in our infrastructure out there? I mean, I think these are the big, kind of some of the key points I like to bring up. LA is home to one of the largest class action lawsuits on our sidewalks. They're just not accessible for individuals with disabilities or mobility limitations. We have so many broken streetlights, empty tree wells, and you all know this. Also, we're just losing a lot of people we love, and our families are being devastated by our dangerous road conditions, our dangerous sidewalks. And then good luck finding a bathroom when you're out there riding the bus or you're out there with your kids and you need a public bathroom. The city of Los Angeles has less public bathrooms than a UN refugee camp. Somebody, I think it was Maylin Liu who wrote that article. So only 15 public bathrooms in the city's public right-of-way. So we're talking 500 square miles and 15 public bathrooms. All this to say is this big point I'm trying to make is that we have inconsistent investments and services across neighborhoods. A lot of investments are often based on your access to power and who you know. So what, we have no money to fix our sidewalks or streets, or what's going on? Well, I would say that's not really the case. What you're looking at here, often when you hear budget conversations about the city of Los Angeles, we're talking about the general fund, right? So that's where the LAPD money comes from, fire department and other things. But the majority of funding that's available for our streets and sidewalks, our local funding, is what's called special funds. So this is like local return from our county sales taxes. And so every year, this money flows into the city's coffers, the city's budget, by formula. So the city doesn't even have to do anything. So it just flows in, and it's 100% controlled by the mayor and city council. So like they are setting all the rules on how that's spent. I only got to make that point because sometimes it's like, we're like, oh, well, you know, the state government's doing X, Y, and Z, or the federal government's doing this. Well, there's a big chunk of money that our council and mayor control 100%. So who's managing our city's public infrastructure, our city's public right-of-way? A lot of people, right? So what you're looking at here is all the different departments, players, agencies. So at least 19, 20 different players in the city process that budgets 1 year at a time. A process that, even though I've been working professionally on this for 15 years, I still find it incredibly confusing. And so I want to talk about too, what's all been on the top of a lot of our minds, and it's been incredibly hard this past month, is the fires, right? So the fires are devastating, and we were watching the recovery efforts and we're watching the conversation around them. And I think between the fires, the city trying to prepare for the Olympics and the Paralympics in 2028, we're just seeing the existing problems exacerbated, right? The lack of coordination among our city departments, the lack of a long-term investment plan, and things like that. So I just went through all the things we have, all the things, but what we don't have is an infrastructure plan. But wait, other cities must be like that too, right? No, right? So take a look at this table. This is from a really impressive report that I love and has been really influential on me, written by this really smart woman, Layla Alcaresh. What you're looking at here is, oh, like, so the top 25 cities in the US, like, so they, like, yes, have an infrastructure plan. Yes. LA, nope. Like, oh, cities in California, LA, nope. San Diego, San Jose, San Francisco, etc., right? Oh, but in LA County, everybody must be like LA. Nope, right? So let's level set a little bit. What am I talking about when I say a CIP? I really think of it as a budget. And a lot of good policy making. And I think the way we run our own family budgets, I don't know about you, it's what do you want to do with your money? What are your family needs? What are your city needs? Where are you trying to go? So like, for instance, I think about like Sacramento when they decided to be like the city of trees, and they like align their funding to make that happen. So does LA want to be a city with accessible streets and sidewalks? Do we want to fix X percentages of our sidewalks in the next 5 to 10 years? Do we want to prioritize our trees? Do we want to prioritize public bathrooms? Do we want to prioritize broadband on our street lights? Do we want, et cetera, et cetera? Without knowing where we're going, it's really hard to figure out how to spend the money in a shared information way. Also, CIPs, they get really specific. So specific projects, and also they're tied to how much is it going to cost? What's the source of dollars? What year will this be spent? Also, my favorite capital infrastructure plans include maintenance, right? So not only are we investing in building things, but we're programming dollars to take care of them. I think some of our best assets in our public spaces in Los Angeles could be, if they were maintained, like think of our parks that need more maintenance money, think of our public spaces, they could be really beautiful, but how are we programming maintenance dollars to keep them in good shape? So when I was like, oh my gosh, LA has no CIP. Oh my gosh, why am I doing all this sidewalk work and bus stop work when the whole larger system is just not even working? It led us in investing in place to look at over 30 United States, like cities in the United States. I think our number is actually up to about 45 cities we've reviewed, looking at other cities. How do they do it? How do they do capital infrastructure plans? These are kind of the questions we were asking as we were doing the research. This is what we found. These are things that like make, in my opinion, in our opinion, based on our research, successful CIPs. Some cities do some of them, some do all of them. People are always like, Jessica, what's your favorite CIP? I think it's an agglomeration of a lot of them. Like Minneapolis has a really cool lottery-based kind of system where they're creating a citizen advisory committee. San Diego does something similar. Oakland's really impressive on how they prioritize dollars based on need and equity. I like Chicago, I like Boston, I like San Francisco, who created a capital infrastructure plan back in 2005, and then they amended it to include climate change and resilient investments. Those are all some of the things that we look for. But so you're like, oh, well, so everybody does a CIP, makes good sense on how to manage your city. Why don't we have one? Well, it's certainly not lack of for motions. I want to kind of share this timeline just to, because we'll talk about this a little bit later. We've had motions from city council members for over 10 years asking for a CIP. But here's the good news. While we're only just hearing motions from council members, we're now hearing from one of the most powerful policymakers in the city of LA, the woman who makes the budget, Mayor Karen Bass. So back in October, she issued an executive directive to create a CIP. If you have a chance to read it, it's a couple of pages, but at least the opening is really interesting to me. It's really powerful to see Mayor Bass acknowledge what a lot of us on this call have known and been talking about for many years. The degradation, the neglect in our public infrastructure, the impact that has on our low-income communities and communities of color, the need to figure out what our assets are in the public right-of-way, multi-year budgeting, et cetera, et cetera. So her just even acknowledging all of these things, I think is a wonderful start. In Executive Directive 9, what is she's doing is saying, what we want to do, everybody, is create a capital planning steering committee. And the outcomes from this capital planning steering committee are to do all these things. Figure out what do we want to fund? What do we want to maintain? What are our assets? How do we want to prioritize? And at the end of that, we should have a 5-year capital infrastructure plan. She is asking for that. One thing I want to take a pause and a beat on is, like, you see, like, centralized asset management system. You're like, what the heck is that? That, I think it sounds really boring, but I think it's actually one of the most important things there. Right now, there isn't an accurate inventory of everything that's in the city's public right-of-way or in its parks. You can't fund, you can't repair, you can't prioritize what you don't know you have. Like, I really struggle with the city of LA has maybe 9,000 miles of sidewalks, but no real inventory. So how can you design a work plan, a finance plan, if you don't even know what's out there? Streetlights, like my husband and I were driving down Vermont a couple weeks ago, counting all the broken streetlights. So, that night it was so dark. The city of LA has no idea when its streetlights are out unless somebody files a 311 request. Creating an asset management system is standard practice for most places. You have to know what your assets are in order to make a plan to fix them. So, as I mentioned on the previous slide, Executive Directive 9 creates this capital planning steering committee. All these great departments, all these brilliant people, good stuff. The ones I highlight in white, I think are really something to celebrate. It's really exciting to see this expand from streets and sidewalks to all public spaces. So Department of Rec and Parks is part of this. And as a city that's like struggled incredibly with accessible public spaces, both parks, both sidewalks, it's really about time to see the Department of Disability as part of the core leadership on this effort. But what am I most worried about? It's all internal. There's no place in Executive Directive 9 that calls for a public-facing committee, a council member that's in charge. This is the person you call to find out more. It's all internal staff departments working, and granted, all those internal staff people are very smart, and they are definitely the core people we want leading this and figuring out, because they do this work day in, day out. But how can we address things like power dynamics if we don't know what's going on? How can we understand what's being prioritized? How do we understand what's the timeline for any of this? So all of those things are what I really want to talk about tonight and put on everyone's radar. Is this question, can ED9 move LA towards better governance? If we all make ED9 awesome, and if Mayor Bass leads on this and so does City Council, I think absolutely yes. This is like some of the things it could do, right? The bottom one is, of course, one of the best, better maintain infrastructure, but like it could be shared power. People can know what's happening. We could have multi-year work plans for city staff. We could move away from a divide by 15, which is when we divide our dollars by council districts and it's everybody for themselves. We could move away from a framework where each council district kind of does what it wants, instead move towards a citywide vision where we're prioritizing our high need neighborhoods first, not last. And there's a consensus and an agreement and a transparency about where our public dollars are going and the city we want to live in. Say we're really powerful and organized and awesome and we get ED9 to really get going, because I think there is this actually magic moment where we could do that. I think it could lead to some informed, really great ideas on charter reform. Did you know there's no director of public works? A department that has all these bureaus and different offices, but not one person in charge. Did you know there's no capital planning office? So the way projects are developed for our streets, sidewalks, parks are sometimes just based on really good go-getter staff or a council office that wants to lead. But there's not a centralized place of like, this is what the city needs. This is how we're going to coordinate, et cetera, et cetera. I also think we could do this and they could do the CIP and they could be like, whoa, we are really short on money. If we want to achieve the maintenance of all of these things, trees, streetlights, sidewalks, roads, potholes, perhaps we need more revenue. That is a common thing that other cities do. Long Beach, one of the ways they're paying for a lot of their Olympic investments, where they've programmed, I think, like 800 million in advance of 2028, is through Measure A. They have their own citywide measure that generates infrastructure dollars. So I'm almost getting close to handing it off to Alex, and I'm really excited to move to discussion here, what everyone's thinking. But here's some things like I think we could do right away. Again, like this is tenuous. ED9 is really awesome and it says a lot of important things, but I think many of us on the call have seen good motions, previous good executive directives that sound really great, but they don't go anywhere because we don't build power. Mayor Bass needs to know that people care about this. And I think one of the things too, and a lot of the memos I've written, Investing Places written over the past few years, the #1 recommendation for creating a capital infrastructure plan in LA is we need our mayor and city council to all agree and to say out loud what the heck the vision is for the public right of way. What are the priorities? And then for people like ideas for engaging our council members, ask them what they're doing to support. Do they know about Executive Directive 9? Are they engaged on it? Are they pushing for funding for it in the new budget that the city will release in April? And while sometimes council member offices can be like, oh, tell us what motion you want, I think we really got to push them beyond that, because this is going to be tough, right? I think people are always like, oh, why don't we do a CIP? Because it's hard work. Sharing power, transparency, coordination, that's hard. We can't just do a motion and walk away. We need our council to engage in public discussions, to create a way for the public to get involved, and to really make sure that we move this forward. And I would say accelerate it, like not wait any longer. And then these are some of my thoughts on like what we need to do, but I can't underscore enough that unless people from outside the city say this is a priority and say, the city doesn't have to be run like this, we can do better. There are so many experts in LA who we can work together with to figure this out. I'm so glad LA Forward's doing this, and Alex is gonna talk next from ACT LA. These are really great organizing places that I'm excited to partner with and work with to elevate and bring more people to the table. I think that if we all work together collectively, and also like just kind of acknowledge LA is an outlier, and it's a policy choice to let our public spaces get this run down. And it doesn't, there's plenty of cities who figured this out, and there's plenty of brilliant people even on this call that I think we can do it. And I think the fires, the Olympics, the changing political winds, all of those things, I don't think we should wait any longer personally. And I think that's it. So Alex, over to you.
Great. Man, you are a hard person to follow, but I'm excited to be here tonight. And thank you so much for, I've seen a different version of that presentation, and it's just so good, from the $1 billion gamble to I don't know, this topic is so fascinating. And I'm going to go a little bit out of order on my comments because Jessica, you ended on something that I'm just personally really passionate about, and it's part of why ACT LA is here. And I just really want to emphasize everything Jessica was saying about how this is going to take sustained pressure and urgency, because having been in that building and working in advocacy right now, the city is just absolutely allergic to changing processes. And what we're asking for, to Jessica's point about it can't just be doing a motion and then setting it and forgetting it. What we're really asking for is we need electeds across the city, from the mayor to council members, to lean on departments and expend political capital to make this work. So they're not going to do that if they don't hear from us. So that said, okay, I'm Alex McIlvain. I'm the communications manager at ACT LA. ACT LA is a coalition of 49 organizations across LA, both the city and the county, all of which organizations work either primarily or in some way on housing and transit. Our work is around the intersection of those two. In
February 8th, 11.
In ACT LA, in that organization, in our big family tent, is investing in place and LA Forward, the LA Forward Institute specifically, I believe. So if you consider yourself an LA Forward member or part of the LA Forward family, congratulations, you're also in ACT LA, and I'm very happy to meet you. So I'm here tonight because our coalition, all 49 organizations and our staff and our steering committee and our transit justice committee, could not be more excited about the opportunity presented by ED9 and the prospect of doing a real meaningful CIP in Los Angeles. ACT LA's transit advocacy is really rooted in making these systems better and more enjoyable and livable for the millions of people who use and rely on them every day in this country. And we view a CIP, and this distinction is important, a real, robust, transparent, honest, community-focused, and ambitious CIP as LA's chance to create green, complete streets citywide. So what does that mean? That means high-frequency transit and shade cover, especially with priority for neighborhoods where government has long neglected investment, which includes places almost exclusively as places where there are lower-income communities and communities of color. It means ramps, curb cuts, accessibility improvements. It means envisioning the sorts of beautiful, safe, livable, life-enriching environments that are typically reserved for the very wealthiest areas of our city and just increasingly making them the standard throughout. We think it would be absolutely transformative for the city and for our transit work to have this. Here's one example in practice of what this would mean for ACT LA. We just spent the last year on the transit side, I would say, easily over a majority of our work, really a lot of it, was focused around advocacy on Vermont Avenue specifically and making that a complete street. That's a project that was already in process, in which our advocacy more or less came down to holding Metro and the city to commitments they had already made. It took so much organizing, so much work. We threw a lot of capacity at it, and that was just for one street. And even for that one street, it was really just about protecting our progress. So you can imagine how excited we are about the idea of just getting LA out of this building steam with a grain of salt, fragmented one thing at a time type way of thinking, into creating processes that are just so much more healthy, holistic, sustainable. So ACT LA is here tonight because we view, as far as the ED9 work and capital infrastructure plan advocacy, we view ACT LA's role as functioning as sort of a power multiplier to bring some muscle come to bear against these entrenched processes that are just absolutely allergic to improvement. And if you're here tonight and what Jessica laid out was exciting to you, and the prospect of like going to work, trying to like make these things happen the way they need to happen, staying plugged in with LA Forward is going to be a really awesome way to do that. Before I go, I just want to quickly thank you, Jessica, for investing in place, for your intellectual and technical expertise and leadership for getting us here, and Godfrey and LA Forward for, let me look at the number. There are 85 people here tonight on a Zoom about essentially like responsible municipal budgeting practices. That takes some doing. So we're excited to get going, and LA Forward and investing in place are organizations whose effectiveness just makes me feel like this really may be possible.
Thanks so much, Alex. If folks want to use emojis or anything like that to thank our two speakers, Jessica and Alex, really excited for them to be sharing their knowledge and backing around the need for public engagement around a capital infrastructure plan if it's going to work for us and for all of us, not just some of us. Jessica laid out, before we get to Q&A, and I know that Eric has been compiling your questions, so feel free to keep adding questions in there because Eric in a moment is going to facilitate through some Q&A. Jessica left us with a couple of provocations about things we possibly should be doing. She said, organize, organize, organize. She said, let's make sure we connect with Mayor Bass. Let's make sure we connect with the city council offices that can really ensure that ED9 is A, carried out, but also two, carried out for good and for equity and for justice. And so we're not going to take this sitting down. We at LA Forward are going to take up some of that charge with those of you who are here tonight. And so in the chat box, I am putting in a link that is live now. And if you're on this call, you're learning about a capital improvement plan for the city of LA, and you want to be part of building this bridge to those who have power at City Hall, City Council, the mayor's office, et cetera. And you want to make sure that they are hearing from constituents that we think that this is important, and we think that this should be carried out in particular ways to ensure equitable voice across all of LA City. They need to hear that from us, because right now this is in a pile of many things that they need to do. This will get forgotten, just like other infrastructure projects that have been promised for the city. We can't let that happen. And so if you're interested in being part of that strategic organizing force to meet with city council offices, to meet with the mayor's office, et cetera, register for this first Monday meeting of February, 6 to 7 p.m. It'll be on Zoom, and you've got the link right there. This is not going to be a place where we're going to learn just like we did today. This is going to be a place where we work and schedule and like divvy things up. So it's a working space to continue the conversation tonight. With that said, I'm going to pass back to Hannah, who again leads our transportation justice group and is responsible for tonight's program, to take us into Q&A and the next steps. Hannah.
Beautiful. Well, I mean, it's been a really great collective effort. Speaking of which, Eric and Max, the whole time have been fielding your questions and putting them in a Google Doc. So hopefully all your voices will be heard. Yeah, first, a big thank you also to Jessica and Alex for taking the time to talk to us. And I always feel like I'm learning every time I hear you guys speak. And I always end up at the end of these calls super fired up to get involved. So I'm hoping everyone else is as well. But yeah, so thank you, Max and Eric, for you guys' work on fielding the questions. I'm going to pass you guys the torch, and you guys can go ahead and get to the fun part. All right, go ahead.